Hello everyone, I'm Lucy Fanger, CEO of On Technology Partners, and I'm proud to be sponsoring our new program, Women STaRs. In each episode, we will spotlight an amazing woman and the struggles and triumphs that she has faced. Then we will reflect and share her insights. Our goal is to engage, entertain, and explore the women STaRs in our world today. I hope you enjoy.
I want to thank you all for listening today. My name is Shanti Harkness, and I'm the Media Manager for On Technology Partners, a woman-owned company addressing cybersecurity and risk. Join us as we share the reflections of women just like you that have survived struggles and embraced triumphs in their lives. Today, we'll be talking with Bryan. Bryan, PhD, is a Baldwin-Wallace graduate with a BS in psychology and an MA PhD from Kent State University in behavioral neuroscience. After spending several years in a postdoctoral research fellow at the Cleveland Clinic, Case Western Reserve University, and the Cleveland VA Medical Center, Katy transitioned to Skylight Financial Group to become a financial planner. Katy has worked with diverse business owners and individuals, such as physicians, research scientists, families with special needs, businesses in transition, and the LGBTQ community. She is a recipient of Skylight's Rising Leader Award and was a Crain's Cleveland Business 2016 40 Under 40 honoree. Katy's community service includes service on the boards of Connecting for Kids, the Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging, the Case Western Reserve Flora Stone Mather Women's Advisory Board, and the Renee Jones Empowerment Center. Katy is active in creating young professional councils for both the Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging and Plexus LGBTQ professionals. She's married to Mark, and they have 2 wonderful children. Katy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me today. And I do want to apologize. I have a little bit of a cold, so my voice doesn't usually sound this raspy, but I'm really excited to be here with you guys today.
We're excited to have you. So before we begin, why don't you tell us something that others may not know about you or something exciting about yourself?
This was like the hardest question for me to figure out and to answer. I feel like I'm kind of an open book for everybody that I know, but there's some interesting facts about me. So one is I was adopted from Busan, South Korea, when I was about 6 months old. So my mom flew over with a group of other parents who were looking to adopt Korean children. And they went over as a big group and she adopted me. I was in an orphanage. So they spent about a week there together and really got to know kind of the host families and things like that. And it's pretty interesting because up until the age of 12, we would get together for reunions. And so I got to grow up a little bit with each of those families and see how all of those families were evolving and changing. I am an only child though, so it's funny when I meet other people, I see everybody as an only child. And when they tell me they have brothers or sisters, I'm like amazed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even imagine. So I still see everything through the lens of everybody is a single child like me. So it's quite fun.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So let's dive right in. So we know that triumphs don't come without their struggles. So talk to us a little bit about what some of your biggest struggles have been. This can be either professionally or personally. And tell us how you were able to get through them and what type of an impact it had on your life or career.
So for me, I think it's the similar as some of the other women that you've had on your podcast. And I think a lot of women that we talk to, it's that imposter syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. Of feeling like I should be doing something different. It feels like people are looking at me in a different way than I'm looking at myself. So I'm always surprised when people call me a leader or when people say, oh, you're a great leader in the community or a great leader at work. I always kind of look at them like, okay, I don't know, but if you say so. I think that comes from just a background of growing up and having friends who I always thought were much smarter than I was. I was never the student who was the 4.0 GPA. I was involved in a ton of activities, but my scores were just pretty much average. And the friends that I hung out with when I was in high school really put a lot of emphasis on GPAs and SAT scores and ACT scores. And so even as I was growing up, I always felt behind because even though I graduated top 20 in my class, I was still not in the top 10 and I wasn't valedictorian. And that was kind of the group that I was with. So I already had that feeling when I left high school of like, I'm not smart. I'm not as smart as the other kids. And then when I went to college, my grades got a little bit better and my communication skills got a little bit better. And then I realized that grades weren't everything and that I had other talents that I could utilize in the different organizations that I was in college. And I think that has just continued to grow and grow and grow to that point where when I was a PhD student at Kent State, I was getting high scores and I was involved in a lot of activities, but I still never really felt that smart. So even walking across the stage, getting that doctoral degree, I still felt like I was still not as smart as the other kids in my class. And I think that feeling just somewhat carries with me in a lot of the things that I do. And even when I was a postdoctoral research fellow, the same kinds of things. There's always somebody I felt was doing better or doing more. And so I think that's always been a struggle for me, is continuing to achieve, but always having that internal feeling of like, not good enough, not there yet. But at sometimes I embrace it because I'm like, well, that's what's pushed me every single year. Those friends are what pushed me to do better, be better. And so in some ways you have to embrace that if it's part of you to say, okay, this is not who I really am. I'm not smart. And, I can do a lot. I'm just not always going to be the one that gets the highest marks on a test. That's for sure.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know from my own experience that I'm sure this is something that so many of our listeners can relate to is the imposter syndrome. And I love how you mentioned, using that as a tool essentially to help you grow in whatever field it is that you were, working towards in that instance. And I think that's a really great way to look at it. And if we're honest, there's always going to be somebody that knows more than we do in whatever field. Even if we're an expert in our field, there's still somewhere someone that knows more than we do. And rather than beating ourselves up for not feeling like we're good enough, that we can use that to empower us to continue to keep growing and learning and honing our craft, whatever it might be. So I love that was one of the things that you were able to do, is to use that to help you grow rather than allowing it to take over and hold you back.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a hard thing. And I think all women and men, we all struggle with it on some level and in some degree. And sometimes it's intelligence, sometimes it's communication, sometimes it's social skills, right? There's always something that somebody feels other people are better at. And it's just, are you going to get better at it? Or are you going to utilize the skills that you already have and try to master those instead of trying to be something that you're not?
Excellent words of advice right there. So, Katy, did you have any tips or tricks that you've used to help you get through difficult times?
I've had a lot of difficult times, as I'm sure a lot of people have, but my biggest difficult time was when I had a career change moment. And so my background was, when I was an undergrad, I started out in a neuroscience lab. And so I was already in psychology and neuroscience from the time I was an undergrad. I took a couple years off, worked in the research lab, then went back to grad school for 4 years, then worked as a postdoc and a research associate for another 6 years. So that's a lot of schooling and a lot of time. And at that point, I realized this was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I often get asked, how did I move from PhD neuroscience to financial planning? And that was probably one of the hardest times in my life. I had just had my second child. I'd been married to my husband for 3 or 4 years by then. So we were just starting to settle down, and he had married a PhD research neuroscientist, and he was also in science. So it was two scientists who came together in love. And I was sitting there saying, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, what am I going to do? And he was just looking at me like, you are crazy. What is happening with you? But you do. I felt very crazy. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. I couldn't believe I had spent all this time. I was worried about what other people were going to think. How could you spend so much time in school and spend all that money on your graduate program and on student loans and all that kind of stuff, and then just change careers? And I thought I was probably going crazy, but I also knew at the bottom of my heart that if I stayed in the position that I was at, that I would probably be suffering for the rest of my life. And it would be quiet suffering. Because being in research today is hard, and any research scientist can tell you that today, from fighting for money for grants and keeping your lab afloat and finding good people to work for you. It's all very difficult to do. And it just wasn't my cup of tea. At the time, I had a research boss, per se, who was a little bit older, and she had just had her first child, and then she lost her grant funding. So I was just looking at that going, that's not why I signed up for this position. So that was one of the toughest times that I had. And the things that got me through it were obviously just talking it through, mostly with my husband at that time. But it was also just knowing that no matter what, it would be okay. And that I did a lot of research. So I would say for anybody that's thinking about changing careers, it's not something you just stop one day, especially if you put that much schooling and time into it. It is something that you have to research and figure out, what are your strengths? What would you want to do? I started networking a lot, and I didn't even know what networking was, but I started going to different events and meeting people. And I knew that finance was on my list. So I started talking to more financial planners, and I started talking to more people. So I think the biggest thing for me, because I'm pretty analytical, is to do as much research as I can, talk to people, ask really good questions, and figure out, like, is this something I think I could do? And those are the things that get me through the hard times. It's research, it's listening to a lot of personal development podcasts. Like, I am a podcast personal development junkie, and that's a thing that nobody really knows about me. So maybe I should use that for my first question. But I listen to probably 3 or 4 personal development podcasts a day. And it can be from everything from business to personal, to how to raise your kids, to how to be a woman in finance, like all these different things. But I just love that growth aspect. So if I'm having a hard day, I just go to the internet and I'm like, who is going to be talking about something that's going to just get me out of my head and into something else, so that I am motivated to keep moving forward.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I absolutely agree about the research and the talking to people. And especially if somebody is looking at potentially changing careers, talking to people is so important, because you have that ability to ask the person, okay, well, what do you wish you would have known before you got into your field? And that can help formulate whether that's a path that you want to go down or not, or, what you might need to research a little bit more before making that switch. So I think that is an excellent piece of advice right there for anybody that's considering that.
Yeah. And it's so much easier today. All you have to do is go on the internet.
Right. Yep. A lot more information at our fingertips, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's take a moment now and focus on your biggest triumph. Can you share what that was and what made it so great for you?
Yeah, this was also another hard question. So I don't think I've ever had just one big triumph. I actually think that my life is composed up of many little triumphs. I think that the biggest thing for me is I believe very strongly that everything in my life happens for a reason, every single thing, good and bad. And I grew up with a mom who was a single mom, and we lived in a community where that was not as prevalent. There were mostly, more people who are married and had a couple kids and lived in a big house. And I didn't come from that wealth. And that really shaped me, because it made me work hard, and it made me really see that whatever I wanted, I was going to have to work for and pay for. So from the very first early age that I could work, when I was 13, my first job was cold calling the PTA phone book and getting my first babysitting job. And that job led to, it was like 5 or 6 years for the same family every summer, every Saturday. And I grew up with those children, ended up going to the wedding of one of them. But you don't realize the impact of what a small cold call to a PTA phone book is going to have on the rest of your life, because I had to cold call when I was working in college for a calling center, and I have to talk to people I don't know every day in the job that I'm in. And all of that has carried from the time I was 13. But at the time I was 13, would I have ever known that? Probably not, right? And I've realized as I've gotten older that I have been very fortunate. And I think that whole process and mentality of thinking that everything happens for a reason has allowed me to do almost every single thing that I have ever wanted to do has happened. So I will just name a couple, and this isn't to like brag about it, but this just shows you the power of like, I wanted to be a model when I was 16, and I ended up working for a modeling agency and becoming a model for a few years. I wanted to be a waitress. I was a waitress. I wanted to be a professor. I became a professor. I wanted to get a PhD. I got the PhD. I wanted to do science. I knew that when I was little, like I want to do something scientific. I ended up being able to do science for a little while. Did I stay in it? No, right? I wanted to sing in a band. Well, I didn't get to sing in a big band, but I did get to sing for my firm like a couple of years ago. And whether they liked it or not, I still got to sing in front of them. And I've gotten to have a family. When I was growing up, I would go to big houses and see what everybody else had. And I have a nice house now, right? And a nice family. So I wanted to do karate, and I never thought that was possible. My kids started taking Taekwondo. I joined them and we all got our black belts. So, it just keeps evolving. And that's what I love about life, is that they are little triumphs that you are overcoming all the time. And you don't even know what you're doing today, how that is going to impact you next week, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Who knows what today is going to be due to bring great wealth and things for tomorrow.
I could not agree more. And I love that you mentioned how everything happens for a reason. And I absolutely agree with that 100%. And we may not know what the reason is today, but at some point down the road, we'll understand why we had to go through, XYZ situation or circumstance, or, why something happened a certain way, even though, we might perceive that something is painful or uncomfortable at the time that it's happening. At some point down the road, we'll understand why. And we'll realize that actually made us stronger and more prepared for what was coming.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes the tough times and those things where you feel like you have to triumph, right? I think that's what makes those times a little easier, because if you just think there has to be a reason for why I'm going through what I'm going through now, and that may not show itself tomorrow, but it will show itself eventually, then it helps you realize it's not forever.
So Katy, as women, we struggle and juggle with a multitude of different things. We've got career, family, household responsibilities. Sometimes there's illnesses or caregiving. How do you maintain a work-life balance? And what do you think that employers could do to be more supportive of that balance?
Yeah, I don't believe in work-life balance. I don't think it exists, which I know a lot of people hate when they're like, why do you say that? But I just don't think it exists. I think there is a balancing act that we try to do, but I don't ever think that things are always in balance. And I always say that there are days when I'm the best mom, and there are days when I'm the worst mom, right? There are days when I'm the best financial planner, and there are days when I can't be the best financial planner because I have to go and pick up my kid from the ER or something like that. So it's not a balance. It's just figuring out, how do I make everything work and do it to the best of my ability, right? For me, the balancing act really revolves, unfortunately, because nobody else can have them but my husband. He is fantastic and really is a great support. So, he's cooking, he's cleaning, he's helping me. He's been supportive when I moved from being a researcher to a financial planner, which changed our whole lifestyle very quickly at a time when we had a newborn and a 2-year-old sitting in the house. So without him, I'm not quite sure I would have made it to where I'm at today either. But now that we're a little bit more settled and we're more adjusted, I would say the balance for me comes in taking time for myself, right? I go to bed early. I wake up early. I try to take care of myself. I make sure that I am spending time with my kids, listening to what's going on, trying to get to know them because they're 13 and 10 now. So getting to know them as little human beings and who they are and what's important to them, and just spending that quality time with them. But at the same time, they know that sometimes when we're at the dinner table, I might have to leave if there's an important meeting that I need to get to. We have our schedules and things. I live and die by my calendar. So my calendar runs my life, which I think is like a book of like, don't let your calendar run your life. But if I didn't have my calendar, I don't know what would happen, but it probably wouldn't be good. And then in the last couple of years, what I've really learned is I have to outsource. So, when I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have to take my dog for a walk today. I don't even have an extra 30 minutes to do that. Then I have to figure out who can I hire to take my dog for a walk, right? I wasn't always in the position to be able to do that though, from a financial standpoint. So sometimes you just have to figure out what do you have to do, and then what can you outsource depending on the financial positions that you have and what you're in.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And even though you say you don't believe in work-life balance, I still feel like, it is still a balancing act that you described. And, like you mentioned, it might not always be in balance. It might be, teetering one way or another on one day or another. But I think overall, honestly, I think women are like master jugglers. That, we have so many things that we're taking care of. And, some days we might be, giving more attention to one thing over another, but then the next day, that those roles might switch. So I think you're still, working on that balance. And, like you said, it's, some days are better than another for different things. And I think it's a good reminder for everybody that, it's a process, and things are going to change from day to day, and to just be flexible with that and go with it. And like you said, outsource what you need to. If you need to find, delegate a task to somebody else, so that you keep your sanity and still get everything, accomplished that needs done, find whatever support you need to do that. So yeah. I think that's great.
And I think the other thing I would say to that is, I think the harder struggle for women is the mind balance, right? It is not so much the doing everything. I think women, we can do it all if we really want to. It is the mind balance of like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Like, how do I compartmentalize that in my head to make that work, right? So when I'm with my kids, I can't be thinking about work. And when I'm at work, I can't be thinking about my kids. And I can't be thinking about how dirty the house is right? So it's how do we just stay in the moment, which I guess goes back to the mindfulness thing that a lot of people talk about and talk through. The other thing is, I found as I've gotten older, you got to figure out how to enjoy the stuff that you might not enjoy. So for me, most of my friends have house cleaners. Like I think all my friends have house cleaners, but I love cleaning the house. Now, I don't love having to clean the house, but I do love to clean. So when I'm cleaning, it's like cathartic for me, right? I love pulling weeds. I know it's crazy, but that to me is like the most meditative process of just pulling and like seeing that you're actually getting something done. So there are things that I'm like, okay, how can I enjoy some of these things that we just kind of say, oh, I have to do this. Like, I have to do this. Now, if you tell me I have to cook dinner every single night, that is probably going to be one of those things where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. But my husband is a good cook, so he does that. But it's trying to find some joy in some of the things that we think are hard too.
I love it. And I love that you mentioned about mindfulness, and it's so true. And I know that's definitely something that has helped me, especially with anxiety and worrying about this or that, and just really taking the time to be present in the moment and not worrying about the past, which is, already done and gone and can't be changed, and not, being anxious or worried about the future because that's not even here yet. And to just really remind myself to stay present in the moment. And, there's I don't think a lot of people realize how joyful the present moment can be. When you're not worried about the past, when you're not anxious about the future, you're just in the moment, fully present in the moment. It really is a joyful experience. And I think oftentimes we just get wrapped up in, our to-do list and all of the things that need to be accomplished and, all of our responsibilities that we kind of we lose sight of that. I think so. I think it's just a nice reminder for us to check back in with that and make sure that we're being present in the moment so that, there's a lot of inspiration that comes from that, because we get out of our own head when we're fully present. And so, solutions to problems can just spontaneously arise like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Well, you didn't think of it because you were too much in your head and worrying about, all of these other things that you couldn't see this opening. You couldn't see this possibility, until you got out of your own way.
Yeah. I think that's why the shower is the place where most creative ideas happen.
Yeah, exactly. So Katy, how would you define success for yourself? And do you have any tips or habits that you use to help you be successful or to feel successful?
So for me, success used to be financial. Right? It used to be, if I have this amount of money, then I'm successful. If I make this amount of money, this is me being successful. But what I found out about myself is that it's not the goal that makes me excited. It's getting to the goal that makes me excited about life. And success for me is really the secret impacts that I have on people. And I didn't realize that till one day when I was working, I'm on a nonprofit called Connecting for Kids. And I had just invited some extra tickets to an event that we were having at our firm for different clients. And I had invited a group of moms who had never apparently met each other. I had, 6 or 7 tickets. And I said, here, give these to any of the family, the moms that would like to come. So 7 moms ended up coming, and they looked like they had a good time. And there's a lot of people there, so I didn't get to really talk to them too much. And they went on their merry way. It was probably not until 4 or 5 years later where I was sitting next to the executive director, and she and I were talking, and she said, oh, there's this group of moms that get together every single week, and they help babysit, and their families are really close. And I said, oh, that's amazing. And she goes, well, those are the moms that you invited to the party. And she said, they didn't know each other before that night. And I was like, wow. I started getting like weepy-eyed and almost cried.
I was just going to say, I'm getting a little teary-eyed.
But I was like, oh, so going back to everything has a reason, right? And everything we do has a reason for it. It made me just realize, yeah, I can have small impacts that make a big impact on different people. And I feel like, through planning, we do that, just general financial planning. But I also feel like there's stories like that I probably don't even hear that I'm hoping have an impact down the road and have a positive impact in the community or for an individual or whatever it might be. I think those are the successes in life. And when I actually get to hear about them, to say, oh, thank God, something I did do something. Like, that is fantastic. All those hours I put into that, I am so glad that worked out that way. So those to me are the successes in life and really what I live for, because they're surprises to me every time. Usually I don't know what's going on until later on. And then I'm just so ecstatic when I hear about them.
Oh, it's so heartwarming. And I love at the beginning how you mentioned that it's not the actual goal that excites you. It's getting to that goal. So it's the process, which I think is great. And then just having that kind of an impact on other people and, kind of like a pay it forward type of thing. And then, and then you're surprised when you hear what kind of an impact it actually made. And it was very heartwarming to hear you share that story. And I admit I got a little teary-eyed. I love stories like that and just how it inspires other people and what an impact it makes on somebody else's life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think everybody has a story like that. They just don't know what they've actually created or what they've actually done or the impact they've had. So It's great when you get to hear them.
So, Katy, let's take a moment and have you reflect on something that you wish you would have known sooner in life and share that with us.
Oh, I wish that when I was younger, I would have known that hard work and communication were more important almost than my GPA. Because I feel like that really had a huge impact on me, was always trying to chase the GPA, trying to chase the test taking, and understanding like my test taking abilities are really pretty bad. I have huge test anxiety. You give me a multiple choice test and I think they're all right. And then you give me one that says 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, yep, I have no idea. 1, 1, and 2, they're all none of the above. It must be that one. But I think just knowing that that's not what defines me would have been a lot of information that would have helped throughout high school, college, and then really carrying into even today. So that's what I wish I would have known probably when I was younger.
It's an important thing to know. So thank you for sharing that. So what advice would you give to a young woman just beginning her career, or perhaps a woman that's thinking about changing careers?
Yeah, I think to both of them, I would just say it's okay. We live in a society, and I think it's getting better, especially with the younger generations coming in and figuring out that they don't have to stick with one position for the rest of their lives and work their way up a corporate ladder, and that they can try a lot of different things. But I would say you have permission to do that. You have permission to live a good life and try out different things in the way that you want to try them out and see what fits and see what doesn't fit. Being a woman in business, being a woman as an employee anymore, it's changing. And I think women are changing that dynamic and changing that definition. It is, being a woman sometimes is difficult because you have to call out difficult situations sometimes. So a great story I have been sharing lately is I was at a happy hour once, and there was a gentleman there who asked me what I did. And I said I was a financial planner with Skylight. And he said, "Oh, what does your husband do?" And I said, "He's a physician." And he goes, "Oh, so you're just icing on the cake." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that's not appropriate to say, and I don't think you should say that." But in the moment, if that had happened to me 10 years ago, I don't know how I would have responded, to be quite honest. I don't think I would have responded in the same way. I think I would have still had that same gut reaction of like, what the heck? But I might have laughed it off. I might have done something else. But I think women should know that, you know, as you're in business, even if you're an employee, whatever it is, you have rights, and you have rights to speak up for yourself, right? And if you're in a position where maybe you're not a manager, or maybe you're an employee and you feel like you're not heard in your position, there's always other positions, right? Don't let your position and your job define how you're going to react and how you're going to be in a company. There's always another company there.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that experience. And you're absolutely right. No job is worth, degrading your human dignity like that. And, you're right. There's always another position, and it doesn't matter what field you're in, you're always going to be replaceable. So if you're replaceable, you can find another job that doesn't tear down your human dignity, or doesn't, tear down your self-respect. So it's so important to remember that. So I'm very glad that you said that. Thank you. So Katy, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, they can email me at kbryan, Bryan, at financialguide.com, or they can go to the Skylight Financial Group website and look me up, or give me a call on my cell phone, which is under the Skylight website there.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Katy, it has been an absolute privilege speaking with you. Thank you again so much for taking the time for this interview.
Thank you. This has been so much fun, and you guys do such a wonderful job. And I am just privileged to be part of the speakers that you've had, because they are amazing, and all awesome in their own right.
Thank you so much. We absolutely agree with everything you just said. So On Technology Partners wants to thank you for joining us on this episode of Women STaRs. If you'd like to appear on a future podcast episode, or if you'd like to nominate a businesswoman to be interviewed for Women STaRs, please email stars@ontechpartners.com. My name is Shanti Harkness. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on today's journey. Remember, you are all Women STaRs. If you wish to learn more about our Women STaRs program or want to be a guest on our show, contact us at stars@ontechpartners.com. And thank you to On Technology Partners for helping me make this program a reality. Remember, we at On Technology Partners want to help you protect your team from hackers. To learn more about our cybersecurity services, go to ontechnologypartners.com.